Oak, I know what you're thinking. You see me, Frank? A bulldog with my classic droopy face, wide-set shoulders, and general don't-mess-with-me demeanor. You think, here goes a guy with no worries in the world. And yeah, maybe that's true most of the time. I have it all. Warm bed, kibble supply, humans who adore me. But what no one tells you is that even a bulldog like me has his share of problems. And even the toughest dogs need a friend sometimes. I live with my human, Jane. She's a great person, really. Soft hands, nice voice, always calling me silly names like Snuggle Wuggle, which frankly I could live without. She takes good care of me, and for the most part my life is cozy and predictable. But you see, Jane doesn't really understand me. I mean, she thinks I'm just a simple bulldog who wants kibble and belly rubs, and yeah, I do love those things. But even a bulldog needs another dog, a buddy who gets what it's like to face the big, tough world. So wouldn't you know it, I found my best buddy in the most unexpected place, the vet clinic. Now let me tell you straight up, I'm not a fan of the vet. It's the last place any of us dogs want to go. Jane insists on bringing me there every month, like some kind of sadistic ritual she calls a routine checkup. Routine for her, maybe, but for me, it's a nightmare. Every time I see that building, my heart sinks. And the smell, oh, it's the worst. The stench of antiseptic, rubber gloves, and something only us dogs can smell. Pure terror. So on this particular Tuesday, I'm strapped into the back seat of Jane's car, giving her my best, "Are you really doing this to me?" look. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. She drives us to the vet without so much as a second thought, and soon we're walking into the clinic. The doors slide open, and there it is, the unmistakable smell of dread. I try to dig my paws into the linoleum, but Jane just pulls harder, muttering something about how silly I'm being. Yeah, silly. That's what they call it. The waiting room is packed with dogs, nervous poodles, a shaky chihuahua, a beagle who looks like he's about to pass out. And that's when I see him. Sitting across from me is this wiry little terrier, barely half my size. He's got a scruffy coat and a face that says he's been through a lot more than the average dog. His eyes are sharp, squinting as he sizes up everyone in the room, particularly the vet techs, like he's calculating an escape plan. And then he looks at me. Our eyes meet, and I can just tell. This guy gets it. He knows the score. This isn't his first rodeo. Trying to play it cool, I scoot over a bit and mutter, "Vet visits, huh?" He gives me a slow nod, his expression not changing one bit. Yep, just another day in paradise. He says it with the kind of sarcasm I can appreciate. Last time, they tried to stick me with something they called a booster. He makes air quotes with his paws. They said it would boost my health, but I don't buy it. I chuckle, feeling an instant connection. Yeah, right. I bet it wasn't boosting anything but their egos. We settle into a rhythm, trading horror stories like a couple of old war buddies. I tell him about the time they tried to trick me with a peanut butter spoon. It looked like a treat, but they had hidden a nasty pill inside. Classic move, he says, nodding. They did that to me too. I spat it out 3 times before they finally crumbled it up in cheese. Amateurs. Just as we're warming up, the vet tech calls his name. Gus, she says in that overly sweet voice they all seem to have. He looks at me, and for a split second, I see a flash of fear in his eyes. He gives me a nod, a silent, wish me luck, before trotting off after the vet tech like he's walking to his doom. I watch him disappear down the hallway, and suddenly, I'm feeling something I haven't felt in a long time. Worry. I've only just met this guy, but I don't want anything bad to happen to him. Minutes pass, and I'm on edge. I can't see what's happening, but I hear the occasional bark, a yelp, and the sound of scuffling paws. I picture Gus back there, fighting off the vet techs like some kind of action hero. Part of me wants to march back there and join him in the fight, but Jane would never let me. So I wait, my ears perked, listening for any sign that he's okay. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Gus reappears. He's limping slightly, has a bandage on his paw, and yes, he's wearing the dreaded cone of shame. But the look on his face? Pure triumph. They had to call in backup, he says, grinning like he's just won a battle. Tried to get me with the thermometer. I told them where they could stick it. I can't help but laugh. Gus is officially a legend. And then it's my turn. I look back at Gus, who gives me an encouraging nod. I take a deep breath and follow the vet tech down that dreaded hallway, trying to channel some of Gus's bravery. They poke, they prod, and yes, they even try to get me with that cursed thermometer. I resist as best I can, but in the end, they manage to get what they need. I come back out with my own cone of shame, feeling both humiliated and proud. Jane's waiting for me, giving me a sympathetic look as she scratches behind my ears. Normally I'd feel embarrassed, but today, I hold my head high, because I know Gus has my back, and that makes all the difference. As we're leaving, I catch one last glimpse of Gus. He's standing by the door with his human, looking scrappy and defiant. We share a nod, the kind that says, we've been through something together. I know I'll see him again next month, and honestly, I'm looking forward to it. The next month rolls around faster than I'd like, and once again, Jane's got me strapped into the back seat, heading toward that all-too-familiar building. This time, though, I don't feel quite as miserable. I mean, sure, the vet still gives me the creeps, but there's one thing making it all a bit more bearable. Gus. Knowing he'll probably be there waiting to swap stories and trade tips for outsmarting the humans takes a little bit of the edge off. We arrive, and sure enough, there he is, in the same spot as before, sizing up the waiting room like he's about to stage a coup. He spots me as I walk in, and his eyes light up with recognition. "Frank," he nods, his voice gruff but warm, like we're old friends meeting for coffee instead of two dogs about to face the vet. "Gus," I nod back, settling down beside him. "Here we go again, huh?" He smirks. "It's like they never get tired of torturing us. But you know what? I'm ready this time. I've been training all month. Watch and learn, my friend." Curious, I raise an eyebrow. "Training? For the vet?" "Oh yeah," he says, puffing out his chest a little. "This time, they're not getting me with any of their tricks. No peanut butter pills, no quick little shots, nothing." He's clearly proud of himself, and I can't help but feel a little bit of admiration. Gus might be small, but he's got guts. Before I can ask him what his plan is, the vet tech calls his name. He shoots me a look that says, "This is it," and marches off, head held high. I watch him go, wondering if he's really got some kind of strategy, or if he's just bluffing. Either way, I'm on the edge of my seat, waiting to see what he'll pull off this time. The sounds from the back are faint at first, a muffled bark, a scuffle, the clang of metal instruments. Then things get louder. I hear a sharp yelp, followed by what sounds like a series of grunts and barks, and then a human voice saying, "Hold still." Gus isn't making this easy for them, and I find myself rooting for him even harder than before. Part of me wishes I could see what's happening back there, just to know how he's managing to put up such a fight. Finally, the door swings open, and Gus comes out, looking both exhausted and victorious. He's got another bandage, this time on his other paw, and yes, he's sporting the cone again, but his expression is one of pure defiance. "They tried the peanut butter trick again," he says, panting slightly, "but this time I spit it out 6 times. 6! They had to give up and just hand-feed me the pill without the peanut butter. I wore them down, Frank." I let out a low, appreciative whistle. 6 times? That's impressive. He grins, clearly pleased with himself. "They won't forget me anytime soon, that's for sure." When it's my turn, I give Gus a nod and take a deep breath. I don't have the same flair for rebellion that he does, but I try to channel his energy as I follow the vet tech down the hall. They manage to get me through the usual poking and prodding, and yes, I end up with another cone of shame myself. But for some reason, I don't mind it as much this time. I'm starting to see it as a badge of honor, a symbol of the resistance. On the way out, Gus and I share a final nod. "See you next month, Frank," he says, his voice gruff but friendly. And just like that, we've got ourselves a routine. Every month, like clockwork, we meet at the vet, share our war stories, and support each other through the ordeal. As the months go by, Gus and I become something of a fixture at the clinic. The humans don't seem to notice us much, but the other dogs. They start watching us, whispering when we walk in. It's like we're legends, the dogs who dare to resist the vet. I can see it in their eyes, This mixture of awe and respect as Gus struts around the waiting room, regaling anyone who'll listen with tales of his latest heroics against the vet staff. Gus has really leaned into the role, too. By month 4, he's got a whole routine. He walks in, does a lap around the waiting room, nodding at the nervous dogs and shooting glares at the vet techs. He'll sit next to me, wait for them to call his name, and then march off like he's heading into battle. Every time he comes back with a new bandage, a fresh cone, and a bigger story. 1 month, he tells me they tried to give him a dental cleaning. According to Gus, this was some kind of elaborate scheme to steal his bark. His words, not mine. Apparently, he managed to slip out of the vet tech's grip, sprinted around the exam room 3 times, and knocked over a whole shelf of supplies before they managed to get him back under control. You should have seen the look on their faces, he says, grinning. I don't think they've ever seen a dog move that fast. I shake my head, laughing. You're something else, Gus. I don't know how you keep it up. He shrugs. You just gotta show them who's boss. They can poke and prod all they want, but they're not taking away my dignity. I've got to admit, he's got a point. And as much as I hate to admit it, I'm starting to adopt a little bit of Gus's attitude myself. Each month I get a bit braver, a bit bolder. I start resisting the shots, squirming when they try to look in my ears, even managing to spit out the occasional pill. It feels liberating in a strange way, like I'm reclaiming a little bit of control. And with every visit, Gus and I get closer. We talk about more than just vet stuff. We talk about life. He tells me about his humans, a couple who love him to pieces but can't seem to understand his need for freedom. I tell him about Jane, who spoils me endlessly but doesn't quite get that I'm not just a snuggle-wuggle, as she calls me. We share our frustrations, our hopes, our dreams, mostly revolving around treats. And somewhere along the line, Gus goes from being just another dog at the vet to my best friend. One day, though, something changes. We walk in for our usual visit, and the waiting room is different. There's a new dog, a massive Great Dane sitting by the door. He's huge, towering over everyone else, with muscles rippling under his shiny black coat. He looks like the kind of dog who doesn't need to worry about the vet, like he's above it all. Gus and I exchange a look, both a little taken aback. We're not used to dogs who look like they could take on a whole pack of wolves without breaking a sweat. The Dane notices us and gives a polite nod. Name's Max, he says, his voice low and calm. First time here. Gus raises an eyebrow. First time, huh? Good luck, pal. You're in for a treat. Max chuckles, a deep rumbling sound. I think I can handle it. Now, normally I'd leave it at that. But Gus, he's never been one to back down from a challenge. He saunters over to Max, sizing him up. You might think you're tough, he says, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But this place, it'll break you. Max raises an eyebrow. Really? Seems pretty standard to me. And just like that, Gus has a new mission. To prove to Max that the vet is, in fact, a house of horrors. He spends the next 20 minutes telling Max every nightmare story he can think of, from the infamous thermometer incident to the time they tried to steal his bark during the dental cleaning. Max listens patiently, nodding along, but I can tell he's not entirely convinced. Finally, the vet tech calls Max's name and he stands up, stretching his massive legs. Well, wish me luck, he says with a smirk. Gus and I watch as he disappears down the hallway, both of us feeling a strange sense of anticipation. It's almost like we're rooting for him to fail, just so Gus can say, I told you so. We listen closely, but there's nothing. No barking, no yelping, no scuffling of paws. After a few minutes, Max strolls back out, looking completely unfazed. Gus's jaw practically hits the floor. That's it? They didn't do anything to you? Max shrugs. They gave me a shot, didn't even feel it. I can see Gus struggling to process this. For a moment, he looks almost defeated. But then he squares his shoulders, his eyes narrowing. Well, just wait until next month. That's when they get really sneaky. Max just laughs, a deep rumbling sound, and heads for the door with his human. As he leaves, he gives us a final nod. See you around, boys. Gus watches him go, muttering under his breath. Show off. I nudge him with my paw. Don't let it get to you, Gus. Not everyone understands the struggle. He sighs, shaking his head. I guess you're right. But still, no reaction at all. Who does that? After the encounter with Max, the Great Dane, Gus seemed a bit off. I mean, he was still his usual scrappy, rebellious self, still sneaking me tips on how to resist the vet. But there was something missing. It was like he'd lost a bit of that fire, the spark that made him Gus, the defiant terrier. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe our monthly vet rebellion was getting a little old for him. But what could I say? We were in this together, and Gus was my buddy. So I tried my best to keep his spirits up, hoping he'd bounce back. The next month, we met at the vet's like always. I walked in, expecting to see him pacing, giving the vet Tex the evil eye. But he was just sitting there, calm and quiet. He looked up as I walked in, gave me a small nod, but there was no usual grin, no sarcastic greeting. I plopped down beside him, nudging him with my shoulder. "Everything okay, Gus?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He let out a sigh, glancing around the waiting room. "Yeah, Frank, just thinking." Now this was weird. Gus wasn't the thinking type. He was more of a do first, bark later kind of guy. So I pressed him just a little. "Thinking about what?" He shrugged, his gaze distant. "I don't know, Frank. It's just, we've been doing this vet thing for a while now. Fighting the system, resisting the cone. And it's been great, don't get me wrong, but lately, I don't know. Maybe there's more out there, you know?" I blinked, caught off guard. "More? Gus, you're talking like you're moving on or something." He gave me a small, sad smile. "Maybe I am, Frank. Maybe it's time to stop fighting the vet, stop making everything a battle. Maybe it's time to just live." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I mean, Gus was my best friend. We'd been through it all together, from the cone of shame to the sneaky pill tricks. The idea of him just giving up the fight felt wrong, like losing a part of myself. But I also knew that deep down, he had a point. Maybe there was more to life than just resisting the vet. Maybe it was time to find a new adventure. I gave him a nod, doing my best to look supportive. "If that's what you want, Gus, then I get it. I really do. But you better promise me one thing." "What's that?" I grinned, giving him a playful shove. "You better not forget about me. Best friends stick together no matter what." Gus's eyes softened, and for a moment he looked like his old self again. "Oh, Frank, how could I forget you? You're my partner in crime, my fellow rebel. Trust me, wherever I go, you'll always be my best friend." The vet tech called his name, and he stood up, giving me one last look. "Wish me luck," he said with a small, wry smile. And for the first time, I realized he didn't need it. Gus had found his peace, his path forward. And even if it meant we wouldn't be staging our monthly rebellions together, I knew he'd be okay. As I watched him walk down that hallway one last time, I felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. Gus was moving on, but our friendship, that was forever. And no matter what came next, I'd always carry a part of him with me. The vet called my name, and for the first time, I walked down that hallway without Gus's encouragement. But I felt his spirit with me, reminding me to be brave, to stand tall, and to face the world with a bit of defiance. Because that's what best friends do. They make us stronger, even when they're no longer by our side. And as I walked out of the clinic that day, I felt a new kind of peace, knowing that no matter what, Gus and I would always have each other, in heart and spirit.